Hi, Allegra here of Beyond Your Wildest Dreams. Welcome to my Thursday chat. As you can see, I'm not in my usual place. I am on the road. And so things are a little bit different. Hopefully, hopefully it's all working fine. And yeah, we'll just go with it. So, welcome. If you're joining me for the first time, I am a brain science-based productivity and time management trainer, author, podcaster. And wherever you're watching, thank you for joining. You are welcome to comment if you are watching live. I will see those comments. And even if you're watching the recording, feel free to comment because I do get notified of those and sometimes in a timely manner. Technology, when you're posted on so many different places, sometimes the notifications don't go through. So, but I would love to hear what you think, what you learned, what you enjoyed. And yeah, following along on this podcast all about helping you save time and energy and prioritize yourself. Because I know I have found that as a caregiver, as an entrepreneur, as a mom, as someone who homeschooled for 14 years, I have found that becoming better with my productivity and time management is not just about learning new skills, it's also about different ways of thinking. It's about prioritizing and setting up boundaries and saying no. That's the only way to focus on things that are important, is to make room for them. Now, today's topic is actually about why change can be hard and how learning why change is hard can actually help make it easier. And this is a topic that I've only come to recently. You know, I train a lot of people, and the reason why this topic stuck with me was because I would have students say, I love your tips, I love what you're teaching, but I'm having trouble sticking with it. And that's when I learned about this psychological principle, the trans-theoretical model of change. And I'm not I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV either. This is all what's interesting about the trans-theoretical model of change is that now that I know the names, it's so powerful. Like I can look back at my life and I can see, oh, this is why it was hard for me to change in this instance, but it was easy for me to change in this instance. And hopefully that will do the same for you. And what I have found is that once you become aware of how your brain works, how you work, it just makes it that much more easy to purposefully do things going forward. But before we get into that, as always, I like to pick a quote. Usually I have a little deck of quotes that I pick from, but I did not bring the deck of quotes. So I'm just going to pick one from this online list that I found. And the quote I'm going to pick is, the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. Marcus Aurelius. I love Marcus Aurelius. I don't know if you've ever played this game where you pick, the people that you would want to have at a dining table. If you could pick anyone, living or past, who would you pick? And definitely Marcus Aurelius would be on my list. If you don't know who Marcus Aurelius is, he was a Roman emperor, but he was also a Stoic philosopher. And I don't know that he would refer to himself as a Stoic philosopher. He probably would just say that he was someone who was thoughtful about his life and why things worked and why things didn't work. However, for anyone who studies Stoicism, which I do, I love Stoicism, he is one of the premier thinkers of the Stoic philosophy. And what's interesting about Marcus Aurelius is, Stoics, I think the term, or I don't think the term, I know the term Stoic in modern life is, the interpretation of the word Stoic is different than it was back then. Like now, when you hear the word Stoic, you think of someone who is, emotionless and nothing phases them. Maybe they're even a little bit cold. That wasn't how Stoicism was defined back in Marcus Aurelius's day. Stoicism is, I actually like to think of Stoicism kind of like Buddhism of the West. Stoicism is more about understanding the nature of things and what you can change and what you can't change. And rather than rallying against what you can't change, having a level of acceptance about what you can't change. And what's really interesting about Marcus Aurelius is that he was an emperor. And so this wasn't someone who chose to separate himself from life. He was in the thick of it. And he found ways to maintain his Stoics very much have a almost a ascetic attitude towards material objects. They like to pare things down to what is most important. And a lot of times that means material objects not so important. And so here's someone who was an emperor and was also saying to himself, okay, these things are not important. All these trappings that I'm surrounded by, these things are not what make me me. Now, the interesting thing about Marcus Aurelius, too, and I'm not even talking about his quote, I'm just talking about him because I think he is so amazing. Love Marcus Aurelius. The interesting thing about Marcus Aurelius is that he ended up having a child who took over his empire and pretty much destroyed it. So here's someone who's incredibly thoughtful, incredibly. Hi, Mariah. Hi, Roger. Hi, Punch Plays. Welcome. So here's someone who was very thoughtful about life, ruled an empire, and yet somehow still made some mistakes, maybe one would say. I don't know that you can always parent a person into acting properly, but what Marcus Aurelius could have done was he could have picked someone else to rule the kingdom after him. And yet seems like he had a little bit of a soft spot, and that, didn't turn out so well for the other Romans. But anyway, he's a fascinating person, very interesting historical figure, and his quote, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." 100%. I 100% agree with that. I think that the more you can practice how you believe things, there's a saying, I don't know who said it, that between something happening and how you react to that thing is a space, right? You stub your toe. Are you going to react to that? Are you going to curse? You don't have to. Are you going to hop up and down and say, ow, 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 ow? You don't have to. Are you going to just shake your head and keep walking? You don't have to. I mean, these are all choices. These are all things you can do. But between stubbing your toe and acting on that impetus, there's a space. And that space is who you are. That space defines who you are. Do you just start cursing? Is it just a string of curses? And why is that rock there? And blaming? Or is it, next time I am going to avoid that rock? Okay. So there is a space, and that space is where you decide how you're going to think about this thing. I do a lot of public speaking. If you've seen me before, I do a lot of public speaking. I also do stand-up comedy for fun. And people are always wondering, like, how do you get in front of 600 people and speak? And do you get nervous is the question people ask me. And I would say I don't get nervous because nervous is a judgment call. Now, do I feel adrenaline pumping through my system? Absolutely. In fact, my Fitbit, when I was doing this comedy competition once, at this contest, my Fitbit registered my heart rate as just like whoop into the 150s for the 5 minutes that I was performing, and then whoop back down to normal. Yes, I felt the adrenaline. Absolutely. However, there's this great article about how Bruce Springsteen and Carly Simon, how they react to that adrenaline rush. And Bruce Springsteen says, I get pumped. I'm so excited. I know I'm ready to go out on the stage and just, destroy. And Carly Simon is like, I get so nervous and my heart is pumping and I just don't want to walk out on stage. So there's the adrenaline is the impetus, but how they think about it and how they react to it is very different. And so I think that's what Marcus Aurelius' quote is about. You know, things happen. I'm not going to call them good or bad because they're not always good or bad. Sometimes something that you think is bad is clearing the way for something better. At this stage in my life at 51, I totally recognize that. Like when someone says, "Oh, I'm not available for this job," I'm like, "Okay, great, thanks." I know the right person is going to come along who's going to be able to help me even better. And same thing with opportunities. When an opportunity isn't offered to me, I know it's not the right opportunity for me. And that allows me to stay so much more positive, a la Marcus Aurelius' thoughts. So, absolutely, the quality of your thoughts are the difference between a happy life and a not happy life. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about the trans-theoretical model of change. I am so excited about this because I find that when I can name something, it like no longer has power over me. When I understand why I'm doing something, I can say, "Oh, now that I understand this, I can choose not to do this again." And that is what is so great about this model. So this model is some people say it's 6 steps long, some people say it's 7 steps long. I'm going to talk about all 7 steps just because I think it's helpful. So, if you've ever wanted to create change in your life, let's talk about New Year's resolutions because it's October 2nd. New Year is 3 months away, and people often, set these New Year's resolutions. I feel like it's starting to become less of a thing, which I am all here for because they don't tend to be productive. And the trans-theoretical model is going to help you understand why they've tended not to be productive. Okay, so the first step in the trans-theoretical model is pre-contemplation. Pre-contemplation is where you might start to realize that you're doing something. And part of you, it might even be mostly unconscious, is starting to think, maybe there's something I need to do different here. Like, for instance, maybe you take a flight of stairs and you realize, wow, I'm a little more out of breath than I expected. Or you, eat something and it's just not agreeing with your stomach in a way, whereas 10 years ago it was fine. You're starting to become aware, like, I'm uncomfortable. This thing that maybe I've done all my life is starting to make me uncomfortable. And you're not really thinking about how you're going to change things. You're just kind of noticing. And you can be in this phase for years. And you might even think to yourself, maybe I should exercise more. Oh, no, 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 no. I don't have time for that. Or exercise, I'd have to join a gym and that's expensive. You actually might start sort of justifying why you shouldn't change. This is all part of, right? If you've watched my podcast before, then you know that I talk about the fact that life is a game played on a field that goes from here to here, your brain. And we resist change because we are feast and famine animals. I talk about this in many of my podcasts. We are feast or famine animals, which means that we needed to store up food and calories when things were good because eventually things are going to be tough. And that's when we need to, access these fat reserves. And so change burns calories. And in our brain's mind, those calories are unnecessary to burn. So why should we change? So this is part of why change is so hard because our brains are designed to hold on to calories and change requires calorie burn. So you're starting to become aware that something's making you uncomfortable, but you're not really sure you want to change. That's step 1, pre-contemplation. Step 2 is contemplation. Now you're thinking, I need to make a change. You might even start talking about it with people. You might even start saying, you know what? I'm going to start exercising more, or I'm going to start eating better, or I'm going to stop drinking or smoking, whatever the case may be, or I'm going to stop procrastinating on these work things that I need to do, whatever that is. And the contemplation phase, you can also be in this phase for years. You've probably Maybe you've done it. Maybe you know people who've done it who've said, I'm going to make this change, and they've been talking about it for years. Again, the brain is so powerful at holding us back in order to save those calories that, hey, it can take a while. But now that you know this contemplation phase might last years, maybe there's ways to speed it up. And that's where step 3 is really exciting. Step 3 is really where this model just starts to sing. Step 3 is preparation. Step 3 is when you start researching, is it normal to be out of breath after one flight of stairs? Or is it normal to have, an upset stomach after eating two tacos or whatever? You start maybe asking around, talking to people that you've seen make a change that you maybe are unconsciously have been paying attention to and thinking, maybe that change is for me. Preparation, the longer time you spend in preparation, kind of you're setting yourself up for success when you start taking action. The next step is action. Preparation, I would say don't feel bad if you stay in this phase for months. Maybe at some point you need to set a date to start acting if you are going beyond 6 months in the preparation phase, but preparation is fantastic because it helps you know what to expect. This lack of preparation, I think, is why New Year's resolutions don't work because people decide on December 31st or maybe December 20th, I'm going to make this change on January 1st, and they haven't done any preparation. This is one of the keys to really making change, one, stick, and two, easier. Because, it's kind of like giving yourself a running start. And this is why I always tell people, if you listen to some of my podcasts about as the New Year is approaching, I like people to start thinking about it now in October. What is it that you really want to work on in 2026? Start preparing for that. Are you going to look for a new job? Are you going to start a business? Are you going to buy a home? Start preparing for that because it actually kind of tricks your brain. That whole, your brain wanting to hold on to calories, it kind of tricks your brain because you're like, oh, brain, I'm not doing anything now. I'm just thinking about it. But, start writing things down, start doing some research. Maybe start making some small changes. My kiddo, she never even asks to take the elevator when we go to her orthodontist because we have just always taken stairs. I always look for the stairs wherever I can. So doing little things like, I'm just going to, try to take stairs more often. Or maybe if the stairs are too hard because of the incline, maybe you just park your car a little bit farther away from the front door of the store just to get a few more steps. This is a great time to ask people what's worked for them. It's also a great time to maybe find an accountability partner or a support group because these are people the support group, these are people who have walked in your shoes. They are going to say, hey, watch out for this because this is what happened to me, after 9 months of giving up cigarettes. I went to Thanksgiving dinner and there was an aunt there who I always smoke a cigarette with. And I could not say no to her. Watch out for that. They're going to give you tips like that, real world tips to help you. So an accountability partner doesn't have to be someone who's already done the thing that you want to do. This can just be a friend. For instance, if you follow me for a while, then you know that for the past 4 years, I have been doing sunrise hikes with friends. And so these are people who hadn't done sunrise hikes before either, but they wanted to get more movement in. They were open to the idea. We were friends. So, yeah, let's do it. So, it doesn't always have to be someone who's in front of you that can help you with this. But having an accountability partner is great because it just makes it that much more certain that you're going to show up. If you have a friend that you know is going to be there at the hiking trailhead for sunrise, it's going to get you out of bed because you're like, oh, I don't want to let her down. So find an accountability partner or support group. And I think one of the most important points of this phase, so step 3, preparation, one of the most important points is to take the time to think about what the obstacles of success are going to be. Because this is something the Stoics did all the time, going back to Marcus Aurelius. The Stoics would always think about what's the worst case scenario. In fact, they like to do a little thing called, I forget what the actual term was, like, but basically they like to contemplate death as the ultimate worst case scenario. Like, what would it be like if I was dead? What would that actually be like? But there's proof that shows that when you contemplate what's the worst that can happen, it kind of like eases, it kind of inoculates you against it. You're like, oh, that thing happened. I was expecting that. I knew that was going to happen. Like maybe you want to give up sugar and you're doing really great until the Thanksgiving pumpkin cheesecake comes out. That seasonal pumpkin cheesecake. You can tell what I'm thinking about. That seasonal pumpkin cheesecake comes out and you just can't turn that down. I actually have something like that where I don't drink soda. I actually gave up soda when I was 11 years old after doing a science experiment on the effect of soda on teeth. However, Trader Joe's has this amazing triple ginger ginger ale that comes out seasonally that I always buy a few bottles. But the great thing about it is that it's seasonal. So I know I can't go crazy on it because it's just not around. And I don't have the space to store 100, an annual supply. So that's not a concern either. But knowing what your weak points are is really helpful in helping you to avoid them. You're like, you know what? I think I'm just going to avoid Trader Joe's in October and November. I mean, I could do that. I don't. But you can plan for that once you've identified what these potential obstacles would be. So this is a great part of preparation. Step 4 is you take action. You stop with the cigarettes. You vow to never take an elevator if it's less than 5 floors of stairs. You stop drinking. Whatever it is, you decide to take action. And then whatever action looks like to you. Maybe you don't, maybe you say, oh, okay, like with the taking the stairs. I'm not going to take stairs if it's less than 5. I'm not going to take an elevator if it's less than 5 stairs, but I'll take the elevator after that, Whatever it is, you take action. And it doesn't have to be perfect action. If you've heard me talk before, then you know I am a huge fan of 70% effort. Now, I wouldn't necessarily suggest 70% effort for something that is like health related, such as, giving up things that are bad for your health. But when I say 70% effort, I'm talking about things like my hike, my sunrise hike. My goal for this year, I upped my goal. For years, I had a goal of doing 30 hikes and I was always hitting it. I was going way beyond. So this year, I changed the goal to 45 hikes. I'm actually at 33. So I had already passed my 30. I'm at 33. However, in my mind, I will have achieved my goal if I hit 70% of 45, because perfection just doesn't exist. And that, beating yourself up because, oh, I set this goal and I didn't hit it exactly, that is just going to demotivate you. So I don't even know what 70% of 45 is. If someone wants to drop that into the chat and let me know, go ahead. So if I hit 70% of my goal, I'm going to be happy. So for goals like exercise or writing, or maybe you say, I'm going to look for a new job, every day of the week. I'm going to look at what the new job offerings are. Okay. If you hit 4 or 5 days of the week, consider that a success. Because again, having these strict rules about what success looks like actually sets you up for failure. So the other thing about action is that you need to know it's not going to be a perfect upward trajectory, right? Life happens, things get in the way. You are like, I'm running late. I'm taking an elevator instead of the stairs, whatever. It's not going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. And knowing that is an important step towards preparing yourself. Like, oh, the trans-theoretical model said it wasn't going to be perfect, that I was going to possibly, relapse or recycle, I'll get to that. That's step 6. So action mode, you start taking action, whatever that is, whatever that looks like for you, you pick a day. And what I really like about the preparation phase is set a date in the future. Give yourself 4 to 6 weeks to say, okay, that day, October 2nd, no, let's say January 15th. January 15th is going to be the day when I start doing Pilates, whatever. But then what I love doing is taking action before that. Because again, it just kind of tricks your brain like, oh, look how good I am. I started before the day I said I was going to start. That's amazing. And so give yourself a date in the future, but then start taking action before that. And something that they don't mention in the trans theoretical model that I do think is important is to set a goal. So if you say, I'm going to do Pilates once a week, starting January 15th, great. Do that. Set that goal for yourself and then keep track of it. Because when you set your goal so low, like January, like once a week, guess what? Maybe you're like, you know what? I feel like going to Pilates twice a week. And then you're going to give yourself that little like, I'm such a winner. That's great. Now, on the flip side, if you can't make it to Pilates even once a week, then drop that goal down. Drop it down to the smallest unit that you can actually do. Maybe you say, I am going to do Pilates once a month. That's fine. Something is better than nothing, and it's going to lead to more. When I first started doing the hiking, I think I was getting in, I don't know that I set a goal for 30 the first year we did it. I think we just wanted to hike. We didn't set a goal. And then I was like, you know what? I love this so much. I want to do it more often. And part of doing it more often is setting a goal for it. So that's when I set the goal, I think. So 2021, we just kind of hiked, like, hey, can you make it this week? And then the next year I said, you know what? I want to set a goal. And this is going to be the reward. The reward was going to tea together in December. So we set a goal for 30 hikes. And some people were tracking their hikes as well. And some people were just like, I'm just here for the fun. Whatever. But for me, setting the goal helped to give me something to track, a number, and also to give me something to shoot for. So whatever it is that you're doing, create a goal, put it in the future, but then start beforehand because it's going to feel like, ooh, extra momentum. Okay. So step number 5 is maintenance. Maintenance is defined in the trans theoretical model of change as you've been doing the thing for 6 months or longer. So for me, with my hiking, I am well into maintenance because I've been doing it for 6 months or longer. Relapses or recycling, which is the next step we'll talk about in a second, it's still possible, but you're different. You feel more confident that you have made a lifelong change. And that makes such a huge difference because your confidence is huge. Like even when I fall off the hiking for whatever reason, earlier this year, I couldn't do my hike for a while because of the fires that had happened in California. The area where I hike, all these trails were closed and the outdoor air quality was not so great. So we were doing walks in, just around neighborhood streets with masks on. So that was an external thing. But then something happened, I've actually had a really busy last couple of months. So I haven't been able, and then also one of my main hiking buddies, she also had a bunch of work travel. So we actually didn't get up onto the trail for 2 months. So that was on me. But because I've been doing it for so long, because I love it so much, I knew as soon as I was going to be able to, I was going to get back on the trail. And we did this week. So that was great. And just, staying honest about like, well, I can't do anything about it. There's no point in beating yourself up about it, but just staying honest and saying, you know what, there's too much going on right now. But on November 10th, when things slow down, I'm going to start back up with my habit. That's fine. It happens. Life happens. The great thing about having goals and having a plan is that it helps you to get back on track that much faster because like this was just a blip. I'm going to get back into it. Okay. Step 6 is relapse, or as some social scientists call it, recycling. And this is where you stop doing this new activity and you start doing the bad activity that you were doing before. I don't want to say bad because it's not a judgment call for me. It's just the thing that you've decided to stop doing. Maybe you started doing it again. I think the reality is this happens a lot. And this is why having a support group and having a plan for getting out of this phase, and really what you want to do is you just want to figure out how quickly you can get back into action mode. And maybe that requires a little more preparation. Maybe you do a little bit better preparation. But the key is really to understanding what caused you to go back to the behavior that you had decided you didn't want to do anymore. You know, are there places you need to avoid? Are there people you need to avoid? Go back and do a little preparation, and then again, pick a date and for action, and then get back into it. And so that's why some social scientists call it recycling, because they're like, well, there's this little bit of a loop between maintenance and action that happens where, maybe you just need to do a little more preparation. Finally, step 7, which not all social scientists describe, but I'm going to put it here, which is termination. And termination is described as you will never relapse. And look, I think for most things, that's probably just not humanly possible. Like me not hiking for 2 months, I would consider that a relapse. However, I did get back into it as soon as I was able to. So, maybe that's just life getting in the way. I think termination is absolutely possible for certain things. Like, for instance, I've been making my bed since I was, I don't know, a teenager. I don't remember ever not making my bed. And I like the look of a made bed so much that it's hard for me to imagine why I wouldn't make a bed. So I'm absolutely in termination in terms of the habit of bed making. Same thing with skincare. Even though skincare was not something I did for most of my life, I've been into it now for about 10 years and I like it so much that I can't imagine not doing it. So it is possible to hit termination. Same thing with taking stairs. Like I don't even think about taking the elevator because I actually enjoy stairs. So maybe that's where termination comes in. I haven't heard this described this way, but I think when you like the new thing so much, why would you go back? I know that, I was not a salad eater until my 30s because I don't like soggy lettuce. And I'd never had a salad that was not soggy. And then I remember going to the farmer's market one day and they had all this kale for sale. And I had always thought of kale as rabbit food. And this was before kale became a thing. I'd always thought of kale as rabbit food, but I was at the farmer's market. And so I asked the farmer, how do I prepare this so I can eat it myself? And they said, well, you can just eat it straight like this. He's like, here, take a piece, chew it, and I loved it. I loved kale. I loved the crunchy texture, and I was sold. And now I eat kale salads every day. My friends make fun of me because I just like them so much. I also like how they make me feel. I used to if I eat a heavy like a cooked lunch, I tend to just feel really tired after. I have just food coma. Whereas my kale salads are so easy to digest. I don't get that, "Oh, I need to go lie down. I'm so tired," after lunch, which is huge for me because as you can see, I'm kind of an energizer bunny. I like being high energy, and kale salads do it for me. So I am in termination with kale salads too because I just love how they make me feel. So I think that's the goal is if you can get to the point where you see that you love this new habit of yours, this new behavior of yours, that's when you're going to be in termination. So that's the trans theoretical model of change. I'm just going to say it really quickly again, just to give you an overview. Step 1, pre-contemplation. This is where you're kind of aware of something, but you're not really consciously thinking about it. Contemplation, step 2, that's when you're thinking like, I want to make this change. Step 3, preparation. This is, I think, the most important phase for success. This is when you start gathering information and making plans. Step 4, action. Step 5, maintenance. 6 months after, you are getting more confident, and that makes all the difference. Step 6, relapse/recycling. It happens. Again, having a plan for how you're going to get out of that and back into action is key. Step 7, termination. And as I've just said, I define this as you love the new behavior so much, why would you ever go back? Those are the 7 steps of the trans theoretical model of change. I know that now that I know this information, it's going to making change so much easier for me. I hope it does the same for you. And be sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you are listening. It's so important. It helps me in the algorithm, costs you nothing, and it lets me know what you're responding to. And if you want to find out more about working with me or my books or anything, go to my website, bywdreams.com. And as always, remember, planning makes everything easier. Have a great day.